Myself, my name is Wייסמן. My training is an anthropologist specializing in South Asian studies. I lived in Tamil Nadu, which is the area of South India where this temple is. Been to this temple many times. I was a specialist in Sanskrit studies, and actually studied some of the textual traditions behind the running of Hindu temples. I actually did my field work in a Hindu temple, and I was there for over 6 years. And I speak Tamil fluently, yes. And been to Tirupati many times. Although I will admit that I did not spend a lot of time in the barber shed because it's not the most particularly interesting place. There was a group of Tibetan Buddhist monks who came to New York. It was very good. Saturday night, they took their bus, and this crowd of Tibetan monks arrives at Williamsburg. And the first thing they see is they see Jews flooding out of their church into the street. And the Jews come out under the moon, and they begin to shake. And they say, aha, these Jews have such deep awe for the moon. Then they begin to pray to the moon. They jump at the moon as they're worshipping it. They shake some more. Then they greet each other warmly. Then they shake some more. Then they bow to the moon. Then they dance to the moon, and they greet each other again and say goodbye. Was there a single error in their observation? The fact is, they observed everything correctly. There are really two things. One is, they focus on details which are trivial. For them, the shaking, the shuckling, seem to be a major detail. Well, it's not. On the other hand, they missed major details. For example, the Nusach of Kiddush Levana would have explained a lot about what people were doing, but that was unavailable to them. Tibetans probably don't speak Hebrew. Second, what they saw, they misinterpreted in terms of their own understanding. Obviously, the moon is not an object of worship for us, God forbid. But you can see how they could come to that as an honest conclusion. And I think to a certain extent, that is what's happened here. I think to a certain extent we have arrived at a series of what may be misunderstandings. And the easiest question is, what do the barbers do? The barbers are from the Mangali caste. They're a group of people who primarily work in that region as barbers. They're organized actually into a union kind of deal. It's a sangam, it's a cooperative rather, that's the word. It's a cooperative. And they're basically employees. And I think there's no question about the barber. It just seems like he's doing a job. I've been to Tirupati. I can tell you it's unbelievable. They're sitting there, they're screaming at each other, they're yelling at each other. They're yelling across the room, talking politics. When I was there, one time they had just organized the cooperative, and they were all sitting there arguing about politics and cooperative and yelling at each other and threatening to strike. And so it was, it was not exactly a moment of religious piety. I certainly don't recall any kind of prayer being said on their part. Now, if you were to ask them, now this is an interesting question. If you ask the barber and you say to them, well, should you say a prayer? They might say you should. But that's because they may think that that's what you think they should think. And that's a very big problem. In terms of asking questions in India, you run up against a very big problem. Someone like me, or someone like you, or someone like the Dayan comes to ask a question, that question has to have an answer. You cannot not answer that question. So what's going to happen is you're going to get whatever answer they think you want to hear. And if they said the word sacrifice and your eyes lit up, you're going to get a 20-minute lecture on sacrifice, right? Which means that the person who, to enter into this kind of conversation, you have to have the language skills, you have to be able to speak in their language, you also have to have a certain interviewing skill and a knowledge of the culture to know when you're getting an ad hoc answer. There's also, if you want, a kind of anthropological investigation style that you need in order to be able to walk into another culture and to be able to understand the answers that you're given and to know when you may be being misled. And this is very much the history behind the second issue. The second issue is the Dayan heard again and again and again the word sacrifice. This is a sacrifice. This is an offering of hair. Again and again and again. And British officers used to go, so they would go to Indian temples, they would ask them, what are you doing? The Indians didn't really want to explain to the British exactly what it was they were doing, because it was complicated, right? So the Indians wanted to speak to the British in a language they understood. The British knew about sacrifices. That was something the British understood, right? They read the Bible, they knew about sacrifices. So they said, we're sacrificing our hair. The fact is that in no Indian language is this called sacrificing your hair. Right? The standard, a Tamil pilgrim who goes, when he speaks Tamil, he says, Morte Ardal. He says he is balding himself. I'm tapping myself bald, right? I'm balding myself. If you say, Muri Gorda, I'm giving my hair. I'm giving my hair as a sacrifice. It's nonsensical. It doesn't make sense. If I said it, they wouldn't understand what I was saying. And if I said, Morte Ardal, they said, no, that's not, because it's a completely different concept. The fact is that the God in Tirupati, right, receives offerings all day long, sacrifices, so to speak, and offers coconuts, offers camphor. These are all things which would be pleasurable to a human king, right? The camphor is supposed to have a nice smell, and it looks good, and it's offered to God, right? Oils that are applied to his body because that's supposed to feel good, flowers that are put around his neck because they're cooling, food that's supposed to be delicious, all these things. Hair doesn't fit that logic. He doesn't wear the hair, he doesn't eat the hair, he doesn't smell the hair, and he never looks at the hair. Right? It never enters, the hair never enters into the mix.
So, for example, if you want to pass a test or something, or pass a test or business or some kind of, you make a vow, and part of the vow is that you're going to go to Tirupati and you're going to bring some gifts to the temple, and as part of the preparation for this, you offer your hair. Now, I use that word offer, not in a technical sense, right? Not in the sense of making an offering, but that you donate your hair. Okay, you donate your hair, knowing that hair is that the hair is going to be removed from your head, and it's going to be packaged up, and it's going to be sold. This is where the language becomes kind of a problem. So the word in Tamil for that kind of offering, kanika, really means a donation, right? Not an offering as in a sacrifice. So this becomes a donation to the temple, and it's a preparation, right? It's included along with bathing and various other things that you do in preparation for going to the temple in fulfillment of your vow. But you're not actually offering the hair to the god. That would not be an acceptable offering, because the hair is ashuddha, it's tame, right? It's an impure hair, barbers, anything in relation that is completely impure. Really, right? Exactly. It's a kind of hasana, right? And it's like going to the mikvah, and in fact they actually do bathe after you get your haircut. You would actually, both Indian women and Indian men, put a lot of energy into their hair. Meaning to say, they often have very long, lustrous, beautiful hair, and it's also a sacrifice of beauty. It is kind of, part of it is saying, look, I grew my hair, it was so beautiful, I'm giving that up for you. I'm giving up all of that beauty and coming to you as a simple person. I look like everybody else, and if you've ever seen what bald people look like, but this is really also kind of a ritual of humbling. It's kind of, and both for men and women, but certainly for women, as a kind of, you're coming to the temple now humbled in that way. Right, a kind of self-abnegation, yeah. So in Rav Dinner's case, Rav Dinner went with a Jew from Bombay, a Marathi. This will be important. A Jew whose first language was Marathi, his second language was English, and his third language was Hindi. Okay, yeah. So that's his third language. The people who he was communicating with, their first language was Tamil, their second language was English, and their third language was Hindi. So now imagine you have two people who are communicating, both of them in their third language, right? And he's communicating about a topic about which he knows absolutely nothing. Exactly. Really, I can't even imagine these conversations. And when I spoke to him on the phone, I had a fascinating conversation with his translator. So I said to him, listen, I said, when I spoke to Rav Dinner kept saying that you said that they were making an offering, they were making a sacrifice. I said, what word did they use in Hindi? Because I do speak some Hindi, so my Hindi is not very good, but I know some. So I said, just rehearse it with me. Tell me what they said. And he spoke to me. I said, I don't don't hear any word like sacrifice. Any of them don't say it. Like, and he said, it's not like sacrificing a chicken. I wish I had said that to Rav Dünner. Because that's precisely not the language that they use. And nobody would ever say that it's like sacrificing a chicken. That's like sacrificing it. It's some form of ritual sacrifice. It's not. It's a self-humbling donation, but it's certainly not a sacrifice. There's a peculiar feature of Indian communication that if a person is perceived as being superior, you can never say no to them. So if Rav Dünner, who is by Indian standards a very impressive looking religious man, white man, comes along and points to somebody's shirt, and the shirt is yellow, and he says, "What a beautiful black shirt," the person will nod and say, "Yes, it's a beautiful black shirt," right? It literally, you could say that white is black and black is white, and you would not be contradicted. So that creates an interesting problem, because what would happen is that Rav Dünner would say, "So this is like," and the person would say, "Yes," and the same thing happened. The same thing happened with the B'nai Brak investigation, but to a completely different conclusion. The B'nai Brak investigation came to the conclusion that a trash can was a god. The basic meaning so there is a charity box in Hindi is called a hundio. It's called a hundi. And the word hundi means a metal box. Okay? It means a metal box. That's all it means. Right? So something which is used to hold charity and something which is used to hold trash, called by the same word, hundi, which means a metal box. So they were at the center. They were at the center where they collect the hair, and so the barbers were shaving off the hair, and they were tying them into bundles, and they were chucking them into stainless steel barrels, into stainless steel, trash cans, essentially. So the guy who was investigating, who was an Israeli guy who spoke like 15 words of Hindi, right? He actually recorded the entire thing. So I heard the entire recording. So I got to hear I got to hear everything. And so he goes and he asks, "What's that you're putting it in?" And the person says, "It's a hundi," right? It's a hundi, which means it is a metal basket, right? Which is exactly what it is. It is a metal basket. And so, but he had heard that there is a famous hundi in Tirupati, inside the inner sanctum of the temple, right next to the image of the deity, is a very fancy, metal box that has on it the image of the goddess of fortune, and it's famous throughout India as being a place that if you give charity there, you will get a blessing from it, right? And so people are very particular that they go into the inner sanctum of the temple and they bring their gifts into the inner sanctum of the temple and they put it in that hundi, right, in that particular box, because that's a very special thing. So he had heard about this hundi. So now, in his mind, right, he now knows, he's thinking that hundi is that, he now thinks that this stainless steel box is now the same as that very famous one in the middle, at the center of the temple, and so he doesn't know the difference, and so he says, "Oh, that's the hundi." And the guy says, "Yes, that's the hundi." Partially because he has no idea what he's talking about, right? Because for him it's a metal box, and he doesn't know that he's talking about the hundi. And he goes on, and the guy just kind of clearly has no idea what he's talking about. Just keeps going, "Yep, whatever you say, sure, yes." And so he comes to the conclusion that this metal can that they're throwing the hair in, which is the stainless steel can that they're throwing it in, is the incarnation of the goddess Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, and that these people are getting some great blessing out of it. And I tried to, there's the whole thing, oh yeah, well, there are people who bring their hair into the temple. It's like, no, they're not. I mean, I called the priests. I literally called Tikurbati, spoke to the priests on the phone, and I spoke to the priests and I spoke to the people who actually empty out the donation boxes. And I said, does anybody ever put hair? Have you ever seen hair? The guy said, no. If they had brought it into the inner sanctum as an offering to the deity, that would be an entirely different issue. And that certainly would be, I think that's a whole different level. If you come to the conclusion that the trash can is a god,
there. So he's a human king, right? And what he likes, he gets. Okay? I mean, that's part of being a king, right? If he liked hair, they would be piling the hair in front of him, right? They would bring, if it doesn't appear on a silver platter, he doesn't love it. If it's a physical material and he likes it, he gets it. He likes musk. He likes perfume. They put perfume on him every day. What they mean is he likes the hair cutting. If you said, he likes hair, everybody would know what you were talking about. Nobody would think that he likes hair. Especially because, no offense, I mean, hair is gross. I mean, in Hindu terms, hair is kind of a gross thing, and cut off hair is really gross.